Hi there. Hi, and welcome back. I'm Dr. Marilyn Carroll, and I am your host for Management and Communications. Let me share my slides or base with you here. And as we go into chapter 2, interpersonal communications and emotional intelligence. Oh my gosh, this is a good one, guys. And great discussions here. So let's get started. So, what are we going to talk about today? We're going to describe the interpersonal communication process and the barriers to effective communication. We're going to explain how emotional hijacking can hinder effective interpersonal communications. And we're going to explain how self awareness impacts the communication process, as well as the difference or describe how self management impacts the communication process and explain and evaluate the process of active listening. In addition, we're going to describe and demonstrate effective questions for enhancing listening and learning. And then we're going to explain strategies to sight read the nonverbal communications of others. Yes, exciting, isn't it? And we're also going to identify common communication preferences based on motivational values, explain how extroversion and introversion impacts interpersonal communications, explain the role of civility in effective interpersonal communication and the common types of incivility in the workplace. So let's get started. Interpersonal communication process is sending and receiving verbal and nonverbal messages between two or more people. The exchange of simultaneous and mutual messages to share and negotiate meaning between those involved. Meaning, encoding, and decoding. So what's the meaning? We're encoding and then we're decoding our communication. So this process goes to communicators A meaning, encode and send, message in medium, receive and decode, communicator B meaning, encode, back around. It's a process, a never-ending process. So one goal of interpersonal communication is to arrive at a shared meaning. That means that the people involved in interpersonal communication attain the same understanding about ideas, thoughts, and feelings. So there's physical noise a lot of times, that's psychological noise, that's semantic noise, and that's psychological noise again. Physical noise, psychological noise, semantic noise, and psychological, physiological noise, semantic noise, and psychological noise. So those four noises are constantly going on as we go through. And I'm happy we're going to cover these because I have talked a lot about these in various things I've written about the noise barriers around us and how people are paying attention to the wrong noise. So physical noise, external noise that makes a message difficult to hear or otherwise receive. Example, loud sounds. Physiological noise is in that internal noise in our head. Example, illness, hearing problems, memory loss. And then semantic noise is communications apply different meanings to the same words or phrases, especially when strong emotions are involved. And then that's the psychological noise. Interference due to attitudes, ideas, emotions experienced during an interpersonal interaction. So those are four types of noises, and I want you to pay extreme attention to those types, a careful attention rather, to those four types of noises, okay? Filter and lifetime experiences. Accumulation of knowledge, values, and expectations and attitudes are based on prior personal experiences, guys. The more shared experiences, the easier the communication. And I cannot say this enough. In one of my other classes, is extremely important that we share experiences. They allow us to be able to communicate with one another better. Emotional hijacking is another area that we have to cover this week. So emotional intelligence, understanding and managing emotions to serve goals, and empathizing and effectively handling relationships with other single best predictor of workplace performance. That's emotional intelligence. So knowledge of yourself and how you interact and what emotional triggers that you have and how to handle those emotional triggers is very much part of emotional intelligence. So, emotional hijacking then is a situation in which emotions control our behavior, causing us to react to without thinking. So here's emotional hijacking. The rational part of our brain is here, and then the emotional part of our brain, limbic system, is in here. So sensory signals enter through the spinal cord, and we're getting all these signals, and our brain is going like, "What's going on? What's going on? Whoa, what happened?" I'm even dramatizing the dog in the room here with me. Belle, she's here with me, and and she's like, "Oh, what is she doing?" So she hates a lot of noise, and that impacts her ability to function. She gets all off course. So domains of emotional intelligence include self-awareness. Who am I? How do I react? What's going on? Self-management of those things that you're self-aware of. Empathy, relationship manager. These things help us to build that. Our self-awareness and our self-management of ourselves helps us to build relationships with others because we know and have empathy for others because we're self-aware of our own challenges. So the foundation of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. It involves accurately understanding our emotions as they occur and how they affect us. Particularly important for stressful and unpleasant situations. So some of the triggers are low self-awareness thoughts. Letitia needs to learn how to trust people. She's not being fair to me, and she needs to understand the constraints I'm facing. Whereas Jeff ignores and detects his feelings to focus on what he perceives as Letitia's misconceptions. High self-awareness. Jeff, I'm bothered that she doesn't trust my motives. Typically, I feel disrespected when others don't trust my motives. Sometimes I lash out in these circumstances. Then Jeff recognizes that he feels distrusted and disrespected by Letitia, what Letitia said. And he also recognizes that he often says things he later regrets in these situations. So Jeff is aware of what's going on with him and his emotions. So let's look at another one, low self-awareness talks. And this is Letitia. This is ridiculous. Jeff promised me that I'd be working on family-friendly HR policies. How can he go back on his word so quickly? And Letitia overreacts to Jeff's words and actions because she is not aware of how past disappointments uh, are affecting how she is judging Jeff. Now, this is Letitia in her high self-awareness stage. I feel afraid and confused. Jeff doesn't seem to care if I have challenging work. Oh, I felt this way before at other jobs, and I wonder how my past experiences are impacting how I'm judging Jeff. Now, Letitia notices that how she feels about Jeff is affected by previous similar events. She knows she should be careful not to let those events make her rush to judgment. Now, emotional intelligence submissions related to impacts in interpersonal communication and strategies for improvement. So self-awareness, impact on interpersonal communication, low self-awareness, unaware of your own emotions, states and related impacts on communication. When you're unaware of triggers that lead to emotional hijacking and making judgment, rash, or unfair comments, unaware of strengths and weaknesses of your own communication abilities, high self-awareness, aware of your own emotional states and related impacts on communication, aware of triggers and related tendencies to say the wrong thing, aware of strong communication skills. Now, self-management would be low self-management, unable to control impulses, is under low, frequently vent frustrations without constructive work purposes, spend a higher percentage of work conversations on small talk, gossip, and non-work related issues, react defensively with me first attitude when threats are perceived. Now, under a high self-management stage, we control our emotion and impulses that are not aligned with work and relationship goals. We discuss frustrations in the context of solving problems and improving relationships. We spend a higher percentage of work conversations on work-related topics and with a focus on solutions. And when threats are perceived, we seek to de-escalate interpersonal tensions and resolve issues at hand. Now, how are you at these things? Are you picturing yourself in these categories as I go through them? Empathy. So low empathy would be classified as fail to listen carefully to others, direct conversations to topics that are important to you, avoid volunteering to help others with their work assignments, engage in a me first approach to work with colleagues. High empathy would be attempt to understand the feelings, perspectives, and needs of others. Do you do that? Do you direct conversations on topics that focus on the needs of others and self? Are you volunteering advice or help to others as appropriate? Are you showing a sincere interest in others, their efforts, their ideas, and their successes? That's empathy at its highest. Now, what about relationship management? At low relationship management, you're more focused exclusively on the task at hand without paying attention to rapport building. You remain silent to avoid discussions about differences of opinions or attempt to silence the dissenting opinions of others. You provide indirect and vague feedback and ideas to others, and you disregard feedback and constructive criticism. You discourage dissent. Respond to others only when it is convenient. Versus high relationship management skills, you build rapport with others to focus on collaboration. You speak out constructively about differences of opinion. You provide direct and constructive feedback to others. You accept and even welcome feedback and constructive criticism. You encourage contrarian views and respond to others when it's convenient for them. So you may be wondering, well, Dr. Carroll, what is self-management? Well, it is the ability to use your awareness of your emotions to stay flexible and to direct your behavior and positively, in a positive manner. It involves the discipline to hold off on current urges to meet long-term intentions. And it involves responding productively and creatively to negative feelings. So what's the mitigating information? Well, let's try this. Let's see what's going on with Jeff and Letitia. Are there slow self-management thoughts? This is Jeff. If Letitia is going to treat me like I'm the bad guy, then maybe I should turn her over to someone else so that I don't have to worry about her. Jeff assumes the worst about Letitia's comments, thus allowing his frustration with her to grow. He considers an action that is extreme, whereas a high self-management thoughts, check this out. Letitia is probably reacting to this way because she cares so much about family-friendly policies, which helps the employees of this company. She is eager to contribute. Now, Jeff assumes a positive explanation for Letitia's actions, mitigating information, thus supporting short-circuiting his feelings from frustration and perhaps moderating anger. Let's try out Letitia. Let's see what's going on. Letitia and her low self-management thoughts. There's no way I can change anything. Jeff will assign me to another project, and that's that. I'm stuck in another dead-end internship. What am I going to do? This thought process gives Letitia where Letitia neither thinks of others' options available to her for working on parental leave policies, nor assumes that other work tasks will provide her with rewarding challenges. Now, high self-management thoughts. Here's Letitia. I want to express to Jeff my desire to work on a meaningful project. We can discuss how my approach to employee-friendly policies, as well as quality of life issues, could be applied to another project. And we could discuss how I can still spend some time working on better parental leave policies in a way that does not require cash commitments during this budget crunch. Now, this thought process reflects optimism. Letitia considers how she can approach Jeff and constructively discusses options that are good for her and the company. So let's look at developing empathy. So empathy is the ability to accurately pick up on emotions in others people's and understand what is really going on with them. Now, listening and sight reading nonverbal communication. So most important skills for managers is oral communication, listening skills, adaptability, written communication, presentation skills, value opinions of others, integrity, follow a leader, drive, cross-cultural sensitivity, quantitative analysis, qualitative analysis, innovation and creativity, core business knowledge, ability to inspire others. You see these categories? Communication, communication, adaptability, teamwork, communication. These are important skills for many leaders and many people, jobs that are out there on the open market. And so you want to be careful and make sure that you fall into some of these categories. Active listening. What is active listening, you may ask? Active listening is a person's willingness and ability to hear and understand. Active listening components include paying attention, holding judgment, reflecting, clarifying, summarizing, and sharing. Again, paying attention, holding judgment back, reflecting, clarifying, summarizing, and sharing. So paying attention involves devoting your whole attention to others and allowing them comfort and time to express themselves completely. As others speak to you, try to understand everything they say from their perspective. It requires active nonverbal communication. Holding judgment. People will share their ideas and feelings with you only if they feel safe, particularly important in tense and emotional charged situation. Demonstrate a learner mindset rather than a judger mindset. Learner mindset. You show eagerness to hear others' ideas and perspectives and listen with an open mind. You do not have your mind made up before listening carefully or fully. Judger mindset. People have their minds made up before listening carefully to others' ideas, perspectives, and experiences. Judges view disagreement rigidly with little possibility of finding common ground. So, learner statements. You must be willing to hear different opinions. Judger statements. Closed off to hearing people out, shut down honest conversation. So let's look at some judger statements. So we're going to talk about Lisa now. Judger statements. Here's Lisa. You're basing your conclusion on just a few people you talk to. You're basing, your conclusions on just a few people you talk to. Why aren't you concerned about finding out more about the cause? Now, this statement implies Lisa is not concerned about cost and isn't open to learning more. This would likely lead to defensiveness. Now, this is a learner statement from Lisa, if she had put it in this way. I don't know much about the continuous feedback systems. What have you learned from the people you've talked to? Mm-hmm. You see how she asked a question instead of making the statement? This statement is neutral and shows a desire to learn about Jeff's experiences and thoughts. This positions Lisa well to ask tough questions later on in a constructive manner. Now let's check out Jeff in his judger statement ways. I spent a lot of time talking to HR directors and know which ones are best at helping their employees stay engaged and productive. Don't you think HR professionals really would know more about this than people with a finance background? This statement begins with, I'm right, you're wrong message. It directly calls into question the competence of the listener. Many listeners would become defensive. Mm. Now, let's listen to Jeff and a learner say, I've learned several things from HR directors about continuous feedback systems. I need to learn more about financial implications. Now, based on what I've told you, what are your thoughts about the cost effectiveness? Now, this statement reflects a learning stance and shows a cooperative approach to moving forward. How would you handle these statements if it was you and you were put into a compromising or a position where you were having to have a dialogue with somebody and convince them about something? Reflecting, thinking about the ideas and emotions of others to make sure you really understand others, you should frequently paraphrase what you're hearing. So, types of effective reflecting statements. It sounds to me like it sounds to me like you think we should replace annual performance reviews with continuous performance reviews because continuous reviews improves employees' performance and morale. So you're not happy with Jeff. So you're not happy with this transition unless we carefully evaluate all the costs. Is that right? Is it fair to say that you think, here's Lisa, is it fair to say that you think we should make this change even if we don't know all the cost? Now, let me make sure I understand. Let me make sure I understand your view. Are you saying we can understand the cost better by what? Clarifying. Make sure you have a clear understanding of what others mean. Double checking that you understand perspectives of others and asking them to elaborate and qualify their thoughts. So, types of effective clarifying statements would be what are your thoughts on considering other ways of conducting annual reviews more effectively? Lisa? Jeff, could you repeat what you just said about evaluating the cost of continuous reviews? Lisa, I'm not sure I understand why the problems with our current annual review process mean that we should move away from our annual reviews. Do you know of companies that are using annual reviews more effectively than we are? Jeff, could you explain how you would calculate the cost of continuous review system? Lisa, what roles will Steve and Lisa have in helping us understand what employees think of our current review process? So let's summarize and share. Restate major themes so that you can make sense of the big issues from the perspective of the other person. Active listening also involves sharing your own perspectives. So, example, Jeff. So, two main concerns are that moving to a continuous review process will be costly and impractical. Now, the software and time needed in the process will cost more than that we invest in annual review process. Also, it may be difficult to get all the employees to participate often in this process. Is that right? Lisa, it sounds like you have a few key points. Continuous feedback systems improve morale and performance at each of the companies you've learned about. Also, your contacts at these companies think evaluating the cost of the software is easy, but evaluating the cost of time invested by employees is not possible. Is that correct? Recognizing barriers to effective listening include lack of time, lack of patience and attention span, image of leadership, communication technology, fear of bad news, of uncomfortable information, defending, Me Too statements, and giving advice. Now, figure 2 for defensive and non-offensive replies. We can see from the original statement that I spent a lot of time talking to HR. And then what the listener hears and decodes is, you don't know what you're talking about. That's what the listener hears. Again, the original statement was, I spend a lot of time talking to HR directors and know which ones are best at helping their employees stay engaged and productive. Don't you think HR professionals would know more about this than people with a finance background? But what the listener heard was, you don't know what you're talking about. The defense reply would be, actually, I know a lot about how performance review systems affect employees. In fact, I'm in a far better position to evaluate whether new systems make financial sense. Whereas the non-defensive reply would be, I think you're right, that we need to pay attention to what other HR directors have learned. Have they told you about the cost of these performance review systems? Or I want to know more about how we can determine the cost of transitioning to a continuous review system. What have you learned from HR directors you know about evaluating these costs? A critical skill is the ability to ask the right questions. And that is so true, guys. Knowing the right question to ask is a very crucial skill. Good questions reflect the learner mindset, and poor questions reflect the judger mindset. So let's look at some questions. Judger mindset. How come this doesn't work? Who is responsible for this mess? Why can't you get it right? Can't you try a better approach? Why don't you focus on helping customers? Are you sure this approach would really meet your goals and objectives? Whereas having a learner mindset says, how is this useful or beneficial? What can we do about this? Going forward, what can we learn from this? What are you trying to accomplish? How will customers react to this? How well does this approach meet your goals and objectives? Types of questions are rapport building. For rapport building, let's see. Examples include, how was your trip to the Human Resources Conference? What did you learn about at the last Chamber of Commerce meeting or event? These questions, when asked sincerely, provide an opportunity to the actor and the listener to bond through understanding one another. They also break the ice for a substantial conversation about the business issues at hand. Types of questions when you funnel. So, how do you think we should go about researching what our employees think about performance reviews? Or how do you think we can capture the employee's perspective about continuous review systems? Another way could be, what types of survey questions will help us understand their thoughts about continuous review systems? Or could you give me a word by word example of how you capture how you capture that in a survey question? So these questions progressively break down a problem into manageable pieces, starting with large, open-ended questions and moving to increasingly specific tactical questions. Once broken into smaller pieces, the actor and the listener are more likely to achieve shared meaning and move forward finding solutions. So let's talk about probing here for a moment. So how often do you receive compliments about the annual performance review process? What concerns do supervisors have? What ideas do employees have for making the review process friendlier or fairer? Also, do you ever hear supervisors or employees talk about how to make the process more goal-oriented? Other than the frequency of reviews, what are some other explanations for why employees make these complaints? These integrations of questions about the causes, consequences, and scope of the group guest complaints attempts to look at the problem from every angle. This approach is effective at identifying the root causes and best solutions. So let's try your hand at probing. Take a moment and write down a probing question that you could have. All right, so now let's move to solution-oriented questions. So how can we find out which software vendors offer the most attractive performance review features? What are your ideas for ensuring that employees provide continuous feedback to one another? What are some best practices in making reviews candid and honest, yet also rewarding and productive? So these questions form the basis for identifying options about how to move forward. Ideally, solution-oriented questions are open, we-oriented, and offer help for others. So let's try our hand at a solution-oriented question. Take a moment and write down a solution-oriented question that you could pose in a particular situation that you've been aware of, but maybe didn't go as well as you thought. Great. Now, as we continue with types of counterproductive questions, here's some leading questions. Example, would you agree that employee engagement and productivity should be our priorities? I'm sure you think it's a good idea to keep costs under control, right? These questions are meant to lead the listener to agree with or adopt the perspective of the answer. Many listeners will resent feeling pressured into the views of others. Also, this approach will not lead to a learning conversation. So when you ask these questions with right and you're directing people, they are not. So can you take a stance that a question or a thought, think about the time you've asked people a question and you end it with right. People don't necessarily like those type of questions. Disguised statement. Oh, this is a good one. Now, why do you insist on refusing on costs instead of benefits? Or don't you think you're jumping to conclusions by paying attention to the opinions of only a few of your close contacts? These are not real questions, guys. They are statements that say you are closed-minded on the issue. This flaw-finding approach will cause many listeners to become defensive and or avoid sharing real thoughts. Many listeners will view disguised statements as underhanded and manipulative, and since they are often attempts to get the listeners to acknowledge their own faults. Cross-examination questions. Just now, you said annual reviews don't work because they don't happen often enough. Yet, last week, you said that the real reason our annual reviews failed is not because of how often they occur, but because they don't involve setting goals. So what's the real annual reviews don't work? What's the real reason that you feel that they don't work? This cross-examination question will put most listeners on the defensive. It may score points for the answer, but it will move the conversation away from learning towards battle of messages. Avoiding traps of empathy. Givers frequently help others out in the workplace and sometimes at the expense of their own individual performance. There are three potential barriers to performance associated with empathy: timid availability, and emotional concern for others. Learning to sight read. Learning to sight read. Consciously practice each day. Pay attention to congruence. Sight read in clusters, not in isolation, and sight read context. So the nonverbal signals are eyes, smiles, nods, hands, arms, touch. As you have noticed, as I've been giving this presentation, I've done several facial reactions. I've changed tone. I've moved body differently. I had some different body language. So you want to watch for those things. So relationship management, using your awareness of emotions and those of others to manage interactions successfully. It's relationship management. Also, adapting communication to the preferred styles of others and ensuring civility in the workplace. Relationship awareness theory is nurturing, identified as blue in this model, directing, identified as red, and automaticizing, identified as green. Motivational value system is it's a blend of these primary motives and refers to the frequency with which these values guide others. Blue, most often guided by motives to protect others, help others grow, and act in the best interests of others, whereas red often is guided by concerns about organizing people, time, money, and other resources. Green, most often concerned about making sure business activities have been thought out carefully and the right processes are put into place to accomplish these things. And then there are hubs, professionals who are guided almost equally by all three of these MSVs. Blues, we see on 2.12, primary concerns are protection, growth, and welfare of others, preferred work environment, open, friendly, helpful, considerate, being needed and appreciated, ensuring others reach their potential. And then people feel best when helping others in a way that benefits them. Now, most people feel most rewarded when being a warm and friendly person who is deserving of appreciation for giving help. People want to avoid being perceived as selfish, cold, and unfeeling, and triggers a conflict when others compete and take advantage, are cold and unfriendly, and slow to recognize helpful efforts on their behalf. Overdone strengths are trusting, gullible, devoted, subservient, caring, submissive. Reds, primary concern, assertive and directing, task accomplishment, use of time, money, and other resources to receive desired results. Their preferred work environment is fast moving, competitive, creative, progressive, innovative, verbally stimulating, potential for personal advancement and development. And people in this red zone feel best when providing leadership and direction to others. People feel most rewarded when acting with strength, ambition, achieving excellence, and leading and directing others. People in this area want to avoid being perceived as gullible, indecisive, unable to act, and triggers of conflict are when others are too forgiving and don't fight back, don't provide clear expectations about rewards. And the overdone strength of red is confident, arrogant, persuasive, abrasive, competitive, and combative. Now let's look at the green, and these are more analytical people. Their primary concerns are assurance that things have been properly thought out, meaningful order being established, and self-reliance and self-dependence. Their preferred work environment is clarity, logic, precision, efficiency, organization, focus on self-reliance, and effective use of resources and time to explore options. People feel best when pursuing their own interests without needing to rely on others. Now, people in this category also feel most rewarded when working with others in a fair, clear, logical, and rational manner. People want to avoid being perceived in this area as overly emotional and exploitive of others. And the triggers of conflict for Greens are when others don't take issues seriously, push their help on them, and don't weigh all the facts when making a decision. And Green's overdone strengths are fair, unfeeling, analytical, nitpicking, and methodical, rigid. Hubs, flexible and coherent. So their primary concern is flexibility, welfare of the group, sense of belonging in the group. Their preferred work environment is friendly, flexible, social, fun, consensus building, and encouraging interaction. People feel best, hubs feel best when coordinating efforts with others in a common undertaking. Hubs are rewarded most by being a good team member who can be loyal, direct when necessary, and knows when to follow rules. Hubs are also people who want to avoid being perceived as subservient to others, domineering, or isolated. Hubs triggers of conflict include when others are not willing to consider alternatives, insist on one way of doing things, restrict their ability to stay flexible, and open to options. Overdone strengths for hubs are flexible, wishy-washy, option-oriented, indecisive, tolerant, and uncaring. So here's all the verbs, the nouns, the modifiers, and the phrases that help us to identify blues, reds, greens, and hubs. If you're working in a team, I would say I would take a chart like this and keep it there. And I kind of map out who are my blues, my reds, my greens, and my hubs. And it would give me some kind of way of kind of knowing who I'm working with. So figure 2.5 is that conversation between Jeff and Lisa, and that continues on. So preferences based on extroversion and introversions. So introverts tend to get much of their stimulation and energy from their own thoughts, feelings, and moods, whereas extroverts tend to get much of their stimulation and energy from external sources such as social interaction. I am an extrovert. I love social interaction. Can't hardly stand being at home by myself. Strengths of introverted professionals are asking thoughtful and important questions, listening to ideas of others, giving people space to innovate, developing insights to deal with uncertain situations, improving the listening environment in meetings, networking among close-knit professional groups, making lasting impressions in social tasks that require persistence, taking time to reflect carefully, providing objective analysis and advice, and excelling in situations requiring discipline. Strengths of extrovert professionals include stating views directly and charismatically, gaining support of others, organizing people to innovate, inspiring confidence in uncertain situations, driving important conversations at meetings, networking at large social events with potential clients and other contacts, making strong first impressions that often lead to future partnerships, acting quickly to gain advantages, acting pragmatically in the absence of reliable information, and excelling in competitive situations. Introverts can work more effectively with extroverts by making sure their extroverted colleagues have enough time to interact with team members and engaging in small talk and light topics during conversation by speaking up more quickly than feels natural for them, offering personal information more often, expressing their preference to respond to questions later on, giving them more opportunities to interact with others, shortening their emails, telling people they're shy or uncomfortable about speaking up, and requesting that others ask or call them to speak up. So appreciating extroverts for their many strengths, teaming up with extroverts to complement one's strengths. Whereas extroverts can work more effectively with introverts by making sure their introvert colleagues have enough time to prepare for presentations or meetings, allowing conversations to have fewer and more in-depth topics, pausing more often and allowing longer periods of silence, spending less time talking about personal interests, expressing their preferences to discuss things immediately, giving them more opportunities to be alone and recharge, lengthening their emails, telling people they have a hard time not sharing their views, and requesting that others signal them when they're talking too much. Appreciating introverts for their many strengths and teaming up with introverts to complement one another's strengths. So, what about maintaining civility and avoiding gossip? Incivility in society and the workplace. In a recent survey showed that incivility is common in the workplace, especially common in retail stores. Many employees who are targets of incivility lose work time or leave their jobs. Incivility is a major concern. I wrote an article about incivility, and so I'll have to find that and see, can I share that with you? So common types of incivility in a workplace include ignoring others, treating others without courtesy, disrespecting the efforts of others, disrespecting the privacy of others, and disrespecting the dignity and worth of others. So maintaining civil communication means slow down and be present in life. Listen to the voice of empathy. Keep a positive attitude. Respect others and grant them plenty of validation. Disagree graciously and refrain from arguing. Get to know people around you. Pay attention to small things. Acts, don't tell. And that's it for our chapter. So, yes, that was a lot of information we covered. But I hope that you take time to slow up the roll or replay. And this will give you an opportunity to really, as you're listening in your car or you're sitting at lunch or you're working on some paperwork or something, you can plug this in your ear and listen to it. And we can have better conversations and you can kind of understand what's going on in your workforce and kind of picture some people on some of the items we looked at on the various charts. So that's it for chapter 2. I'll see you in chapter 3.